Test. All right, Shalom. This is Brother Nahayi from the GMS Orlando camp. I'm going to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakar Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yasher Allah, and a sincere salutation to all Yuakim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to Aquath, who are believing this word in all truth and in sincerity. Yahweh is the name of the one they ignorantly call God. Yahweh Shai is the name of the one they ignorantly call Jesus. Bahashem is in the name. Rakah is spirit. Kodash is holy. Akyam is brothers. Akwath is sisters. Shalom means peace. And Yasha Allah is Israel in ancient Paleo Hebrew. Real quick, this is Revelation chapter 11 and verse 14. And it reads, "The second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly." All right, and I want to go into a lesson through the spirit on this video that was released on August 7th from the Julian Dory channel, dealing with Andrew Bustamante, which is a former CIA spy, allegedly. All right, but I want to deal with something a statement that he made concerning geopolitics, all right, and the Iran alliance with Russia and China, because basically that goes back into prophecy through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shai Shai. For those who don't know, we are coming into the Third World War. All right, this is why I went to Revelation 11 chapter in the 14th verse. The second woe is World War II, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly, which is World War III. All right, now, for those who don't know, wars don't just come out of nowhere. It's a gradual thing, and he's going to go into how the alliances are being shaped, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shai, and how that, and I'm going to go into through the spirit how that relates to prophecy. All right, because we're in a very beautiful time through the spirit. The Lord gives us the general. We know World War III is coming, but these are the details as we get closer and closer. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to play a few minutes of this and then get some precepts. Lord willing, this is edifying.
So it means our entire lives up until 2023, Iran and Saudi Arabia did not recognize each other diplomatically. That's just, it's crazy to me. This is not like post World War II. This is
actually,
yeah, exactly.
Let's go back to the Middle East a little bit, because I put a pin in the Iran, China, Russia thing.
Oh yeah,
this is something I really need explained to me further, because the way I understand it, there's some serious developments there over the past year or so, where there's almost like there hasn't been like a tripartite pact or something,
right?
But there's some serious economic and therefore geopolitical interests that are now exchanging hands to separate, literally, like East and West.
Yeah. So unless
this is prophecy, right? I want to stop here really quick. Let's go here. This is Obadiah chapter 1 and 1, and it reads, "The vision of Obadiah, thus saith the Lord power concerning Edom. We have heard a rumor from the Lord, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle." All right, see what's happening right now is the line is being drawn. All right, the Lord, and this is all from the Heavenly Father. All right, that's why we follow these things through prophecy, because these geopolitical things that are happening all go back to prophecy. All right, this is Isaiah chapter 14 and verse 9. And it reads, "Hell from beneath is moved for thee to meet thee at thy coming. It stirreth up the dead for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth. It hath raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. All they shall speak and say unto thee, Art thou also become weak as we? Art thou become like unto us?" All right, so let's continue.
let's see, will you fact check me on this? I'm pretty sure that China brokered diplomatic relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and I want to say they did that in the last 2 years. If you can just fact check me on that. Iran, China.
And Saudi Arabia. Hold on, go back.
Yeah, Beijing brokered.
Iran and Saudi Arabia announced last Friday a Chinese brokered deal to restore relations. There you go.
Bingo.
2023.
So, nice.
Nice
working.
job.
Brain is working. So now what that means is, think about what we were just talking about. The conflict in the Middle East, the big competition in the Middle East is between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Sunni domination versus Shia crescent. China was able to broker an agreement between the two to work together diplomatically, which had never been done before, 2023. So It means our entire lives up until 2023, Iran and Saudi Arabia did not recognize each other diplomatically. That's just, it's crazy to me. This is not like post World War II. This
Right.
is the whole development of, like, this is the industrial revolution, the information revolution. This is like
It's forever.
this is like forever.
Yeah.
Anyways, so what we're seeing here is ever since the West, ever since the United States essentially pushed NATO into heavy economic sanctions against Russia to penalize them or push them out of Ukraine, what we've seen from that effort is that all of the Western sanctions and the seizing of Russian assets that were in sovereign banks, right? All of that activity has only worked to boost the value of Russian currency, to give Putin a a valid platform to say that his war is not against Ukraine, it's against the West, it's against the United States, it's against NATO, right? So all of our efforts have essentially helped Russia to economically increase their impact. Simultaneously, Russia still had resources, valid resources like oil and energy to export. But now the United States and Russia and the West cut off all of their buying power, which meant that Russia could now sell more to other developing nations, a la China, Iran, and India. India is in a really funky place because India is an ally of the United States, but also works completely independently and pragmatically, like we talked about, because they don't care about whether you import their ideals or not. They have a growing population. They need petrol. Russian petrol is available, gets there faster, gets there cheaper than anything that America doesn't sanction. So let's just go ahead and take that route. So what
Yeah.
you end up having is an economic boom in Russia. You have China, who's trying to distance itself from any kind of relationship with the United States at all. Plus, it wants to boost its economy using Russian resources. And then you have Iran, who wants nothing to do with the United States, but also wants to boost its resources, and it has trade to do. So it partners up with essentially everybody who's geographically closer, ideologically independent, and they have a common enemy, which is the United States. And that's how you end up having, over the last 3 years, ever since the Ukraine invasion, you've had this increasing proximity effect for everybody who's always hated us. North Korea cooperating with China, cooperating with Russia, cooperating with Iran. And then they're even folding in countries that have long time been our allies, but are more pragmatic because they have real needs and they don't need our ideological policing. So then,
All right, man, this is beautiful through the spirit. So I want to stop there really quick because one thing he's mentioning is that even the allies are beginning to um, choose their own interests, right? Because Europe is a perfect example of an ally of America who has suffered being loyal to America. All right. And ultimately, that's going to cause them to uh, jump ship. All right. Let's go here really quick before he continues. All right. This is Revelation chapter 17. And I'll start at 15. And the reason he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, and that whore is America, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which thou sawest, which makes up the European Union, upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. So this is prophetic that the allies of America, those who are a part of the EU, are going to eventually hate the whore and burn her with fire, which means even the allies of America are going to shoot missiles on this place. All right, according to prophecy. All right, so let's continue and then we'll get some more scriptures, Lord willing.
you've had this increasing proximity effect for everybody who's always hated us. North Korea cooperating with China, cooperating with Russia, cooperating with Iran. And then they're even folding in countries that have long time been our allies, but are more pragmatic because they have real needs and they don't need our ideological policing. So then you have Pakistan, you have India, you have even Bulgaria and fucking, there's another NATO country. I just lost it right now. There's another NATO country in southern Europe that's also siding with the essentially the new axis of resistance that's expanding, right? And all of those countries have no problem exchanging practical purposes, practical value, without having to force any sort of ideological restraints on each other. China's not trying to make Russia communist. Russia's not trying to make Iran bow to Putin's power.
Right.
They're just like, hey, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. And at the end, the giant, we can take them down together.
Boom. Now that's the point, right? Because what he's pointing out through the Spirit goes right back to prophecy. All right, the Lord said that, matter of fact, let's get it. This is Ezekiel chapter 38 and 1. And it reads, "And the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him." Now, this is concerning Russia. All right, this land was originally occupied by Japheth, but where Russia is now, all right, is considered Gog. All right, that's the ancient name for that land that now is called Russia. All right, so it's speaking to those Edomites that are in Russia, because the Russians are Edomites. They're still so-called white people. They're just so-called white people in Russia. All right, and the Lord is saying, look, verse 3, "And say, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal." So the Lord is saying that he's against these Russians as well. All right, but let's continue. Verse 4 reads, "And I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer and all his bands, the house of Togarmah of the north quarters, and all his bands, and many people with thee." And for those who don't know, Gomer is going into Turkey. All right, Turkey's an example of an American ally. All right, they're a part of NATO, but they're on the fence. You know, a perfect example is they bought some of the missile defense systems from Russia. I believe it was the S-400. But they bought some missile defense systems from Russia, and then they tried to buy some of the planes from America, and America would not give them the planes. There was a famous interview, a very widespread interview of the president. What is his name? Erdogan. He had a CNN interview, and he basically went into how, when you go into this interview, he was going into how he didn't get the money for his missiles. I believe this is it. Or he didn't get the money for his planes. He didn't actually get the planes. So he ordered planes. He gave money for the planes, but he didn't actually get the planes. All right, because they were questioning him concerning his relationship with Putin. And he was making a point that, yeah, I paid for planes that you guys never gave me. So long story short, through the Spirit, Gomer, all right, is concerning Turkey. All right, verse 6 is concerning Turkey. So we know that Turkey is eventually going to jump ship as well. All right, verse 7 reads, "Be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them." So Russia's going to be a guard unto these nations. All right, so what you see Andrew Bustamante mentioning is all prophetic, especially what he said about them all saying, look, the giant, we can just jump him. All right, because basically that's what these nations are doing. They're trying to economically get around the U.S. because, again, Babylon the Great, which is America, uses the dollar as a weapon. So when you don't vote their way, when you don't do what they want you to do, they put sanctions on you, which basically means they weaponize the currency, the world reserve currency. And he was making a statement that, when you deal with China and Russia, they're not trying to change each other's beliefs. They're just trying to work together and survive and get around the giant. All of this is prophetic because, again, we know through the Spirit that the Lord is the one that ruleth in the kingdom of men. These are just the pieces that get moved around. This is why the Lord said in Ezekiel, the 38th chapter, he started off by saying, I'm against you, Russia. But then at verse 7, the Lord says, Be thou prepared and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. So even though the Lord's against them, he's using them for a certain point. And the Lord has done this historically. Let's get this as an example. Isaiah 10:5 reads, O Assyrian, the rod of mine anger, and the staff in their hand is mine indignation. So this is an example of the Lord basically saying that he used the Assyrians to put hell on the northern kingdom. Well, the Lord is now using Russia, all right, to stoke the flames of the third world's woe. All right, because those are going to be the main characters in World War III. It's going to be Russia, the East versus the West, but when you really look at it, it's going to be Russia versus the United States, and then the allies that are included in that. Right now, a line is being drawn in the sand, and you have nations that are picking sides. All right, BRICS is a perfect example. BRICS is a perfect example because you have a lot of nations who are now applying to be a part of the BRICS nations. All right, I want to see if I can get this. Yeah. All right, let's do this. So this is from Watch Guru, and it says 47 countries ready to join the BRICS alliance. All right, it says the queue to join BRICS is getting longer as developing countries are expressing their interest in joining the alliance. Developing countries are now looking to end dependency on the US dollar to promote local currencies for trade. The move helps their native economies and businesses to thrive and pump up their national GDPs. All right, because what they're not telling you, all right, is while the dollar is the world reserve currency, you have what they call, what is it? Bear with me. Yeah, so you have a term called purchasing power parity. All right. And I'll just get this real quick. It says the purchasing power parity indicator can be used to compare economies regarding their gross domestic product, labor productivity, and actual individual consumption, and in some cases to analyze price convergence and to compare the cost of living between places. Now, it's overcomplicated when you read this, but basically, what's happening in these developing countries, Russia is a perfect example, is that the ruble isn't worth as much as the dollar, but Russians can get more out of their ruble than Americans can get out of their dollar, if that makes sense. So, for example, $5 in America may get you a cup of coffee and a Snicker, whereas 5 rubles may get a Russian a full course meal, you know, and the ability to tip at the end. So their dollar isn't as their currency isn't as valuable on the world stage, but they get more for their money. This is what's happening in places like Russia. All right. Matter of fact, Lord willing, I want to be able to get into that. But matter of fact, let's get it now. I'll jump up in this interview because he mentions it.
Ascension WoW is a standalone.
Slakia, bear with me.
Most important things you ever ingrained in my head just is like how to look at things, and it's extremely obvious but when you realize it. But you said, I think it was in episode 97, the first one we ever did together, you're like, the only fucking thing that matters when you're looking at world powers and where their chess pieces are on the board is their GDP.
Yep.
Right, so who has the biggest GDP? We still do right now, but that gap shrinking. And you keep talking about these different alliances that are forming, be it, the BRICS on one hand, be it, countries that where it's East versus West, and you have all these weird Eastern alliances between 2 or 3 different continents. And it's like, at what point do we got to get worried about the US dollar ceasing to be the reserve currency, which, just doing very basic math in my head, would effectively mean the end of the United States as the leader in GDP in the world?
It's a great question. So fact-based finance and economics, it's a long time away.
Okay.
The idea that the US dollar would decline so much that it's no longer the reserve currency, you're talking about decades, if ever.
Okay, that's good.
However, it's worth noting that the decline in the power and value of the US dollar as a reserve currency has been increasing exponentially for the last 5 years. So the world is diversifying away from the dollar. More trade than ever before is being done outside of the US dollar. Countries that have always traditionally used the US dollar are using less US dollars. So even though the decline can be counted in percentages, like 1.3%, 2.3%, the increase in that decline is exponential, because 5 years ago it was like 0.02% of trade that would change out of the US dollar. So we're declining at a rate 10 times what we
Yes.
saw 2 years or 5 years ago. And if that trend continues, then 15, 30 years from now, we'll start seeing, US dollar valuations and US dollar trade drop 15%, 20% in a year. And that's fast. That decline, though, is largely tied to two things. One, the US dollar is stable, reliable, and insured by the United States. So there's still a lot of value in the US dollar that just simply doesn't exist in something like the Chinese renminbi or the Russian ruble, because we've watched as those governments have completely changed the valuation of their currency just on a whim. US dollar doesn't really do that. It's pegged to more stable things than foreign currencies. So when you're a developing country, just imagine if you had $200 and you wanted to, and like you needed that $200 just to survive week to week, you're not going to invest it. You're not going to take $150 and put it in some penny stock and hope that penny stock explodes, right? You're going to probably keep it in your mattress, someplace really, really stable. It's not until you have like $100,000 that you'll take $500 and throw it into a penny stock and see if it explodes. So most of the developing world wants stability. So they keep trading in the US dollar. But the wealthiest countries out there, especially the wealthy countries that don't like the United States, those are the countries that are the fastest to dissociate themselves from the US dollar, especially now that the United States has set a precedent that if you hold US dollars in US banks, we're just going to take them from you if we don't like you.
Yeah, that's not a good precedent.
Not if you're trying to maintain the US dollar as the reserve currency of the world.
And that's where you're just thinking way too short term, because you're worried, you're pissed, maybe with fairness, about a geopolitical conflict, but you're not thinking about the precedent you're setting doing that. That's a problem.
Yeah. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that when we talk, GDP is the basic poor man's gauge of power. You have more GDP, you went up in power. You have less GDP, you went down in power. The other thing that's just like a nut hair away from GDP is something called PPP, or the purchase power parity.
Okay.
Which tells you how much value you can get for your purchase power from the currency you hold. And in terms of purchase,
in English, what in English?
So if I had a red rock here and a blue rock here, they're both rocks. They both weigh the same amount. They're both made of the same material. When I give you my red rock, I get a cup of coffee. When I give you my blue rock, I get a cup of coffee and a piece of toast. Which one's more valuable? Even though they're exactly the same. That's what PPP, or purchase price parity, is. It means that with my rock, I can only get a cup of coffee, but with your rock, you can get coffee and a piece of toast.
Okay.
So now if we're comparing our currency against foreign currencies, in the United States, our rock gets us expensive groceries, expensive fuel, and we don't get much for our dollar. But in Russia, your ruble gets you less expensive groceries, a full tank of gas, and an extra cup of coffee. That means the purchase price parity of the ruble is higher than the purchase power parity of the dollar. Make sense?
Yes.
So
now that was the point, right? Because I just wanted to point out through the spirit why these nations are so quick to move to this BRICS alliance, because again, it helps them. All right. It's not just the fact that they get to go against America, but it's beneficial for them. It's more beneficial than just staying with the US alone. All right. So ultimately, we know according to prophecy, the Lord's going to allow these nations to switch sides. They're going to jump ship. All right. And ultimately, they're going to have war. All right. This is the beginning rumblings of war. When you end up in wars, it's not just, I got a problem with you. A lot of times it deals with resources. All right. So what you're seeing right now is the kids at the lunchroom are now picking a different table. They don't want to sit at the United States table anymore. And this all goes back to prophecy. Now, another thing that I wanted to touch through the spirit, and this is the last thing on this one concerning this video, was China. All right. So there's a statement that he makes concerning China that I want to get back to, Lord willing. All right, because he makes a statement concerning what China's doing as far as their foreign policy. All right, and that links up again with prophecy. All right, so let's continue. Let me go back to the video.
China had worked very, very hard throughout the entire 20-year global war on terror. China had worked very hard not to participate in the GWAT, because China didn't participate in the GWAT, but instead,
global war on terror.
But instead, they focused on creating economic ties all across the world through trade and manufacturing and whatever else. So our first big warning bell happened when COVID struck, and we all realized you and I can't get sneakers in the United States because China's not shipping.
Right.
But then when Russia invaded Ukraine, another strong warning bell went off. And that warning bell had nothing to do with Russia expansion into Europe, even though that's all we heard about. The real warning bell there was your money is tied to American banks, and America will take it from you. And once that bell rang, that's when you saw the Chinese flood the market by taking their dollars out, putting yuan in, diversifying their accounts. You saw all sorts of countries all over the world say, if America can do this to Russia, and if America can muscle NATO countries into doing this to Russia, then they can do it to us too. So everybody started diversifying their portfolios out of the US dollar, out of American banks, into foreign banks and foreign currency, where it's more liquid.
Yes.
Because now we show that we don't treat your money like it's yours if it's in our banks. If we don't like you, we will freeze it. And then
So this is another point that I want to grab through the spirit. This is Isaiah chapter 14 and verse 5. And it reads, the Lord hath broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke. He that ruled the nations in anger is persecuted, and none hindereth. Because this is what America is doing whenever you don't abide by their rules. And what he's mentioning is how America basically took all of the Russian money that was in their banks as a punishment for going to war with Ukraine. All right. That was a respect of persons when you actually deal with the scriptures. That was a respect of persons situation. But basically, they stole the money that Russia had in American banks and basically took it just because they didn't agree with the decision to go to war. All right. And all the other nations saw this. And this is what's making a lot of these nations move away from the dollar and move to the Russian side of the lunchroom, so to speak. All right. So let's continue.
And then we will go ahead and say that we have a legal ground to steal your money from you and give it to your opponent, which is also what the United States is trying to do, that even the UN is saying is illegal. The only reason the United States hasn't been able to do that is because the UN has said, that's actually kind of fucked up. You can't just take Russian money and give it to Ukraine.
Is there anything that can be done regardless of administration, just like in general from a diplomacy standpoint, to kind of unring the bell that seems to have been rung starting with the 2022 Ukraine-Russia war, where it's this clear divide, like separation?
So there have been clear bell rings. I think there's a great example or a great phrase. COVID rang a very clear bell.
Yeah.
If you think about what happened following COVID, the whole world woke up to the fact that all the supply chains of the world were going through China. China had worked very, very hard throughout the entire 20-year global war on terror. China had worked very hard not to participate in the GWAT, because China didn't participate in the GWAT, but instead,
global war on terror.
But instead, they focused on creating economic ties all across the world through trade and manufacturing and whatever else. So our first big warning.
So that's one of the points that I want to get through the spirit. All right, because again, what he said was that everything went through China. All right, and this is because all of the American jobs, the manufacturing and production jobs, eventually went to China, which is why everything that we have in America is made in China, because all of those jobs were exported to China. All right, and through that, China got rich. And now what China's doing is it's using the same strategy that America used as far as foreign policy to gain power. All right, so let's go to this scripture because it goes into prophecy. All right, this is Second Esdras chapter 15, and I want to jump to verse 46, and it reads, "And thou, Asia, that art partaker of the hope of Babylon, and art the glory of her person, woe be unto thee, thou wretch, because thou hast made thyself like unto her, and hast decked thy daughters in whoredom, that they might please and glory in thy lovers, which have always desired to commit whoredom with thee. And thou hast followed her that is hated, and all her works and inventions. Therefore saith Yahweh Shema Shai, I will send plagues upon thee, widowhood, poverty, famine, and sword, and pestilence, to waste thy houses with destruction and death." So the Lord is making a statement that Asia is decking themselves in the whoredom. They're following in the way of Babylon, which is America. All right. Now I want to bring this out. There's a quick article from the Diplomat, and this was in 2010. All right. And it says how China mimics U.S. soft power. All right. And I just want to jump down to this point. It says that China and the United States are in a race to gain sway over countries possessing vital natural resources, not only in Africa, but across the developing world, is hardly news. But the scene in Kinshasa, U.S. troops speeding down a Chinese-built road, underscores the differing strategies Washington and Beijing have tended to pursue. While it has fallen on the U.S. military to lead the country's forays into Congo and other mineral-rich nations, most notably Iraq and Afghanistan, China has traditionally preferred underwriting infrastructure projects. Indeed, Chinese engineers are a fixture in developing country outposts as remote as Chad and Somalia. Yet, while the two powers approach the question of influence from different starting points, they are also increasingly overlapping in the way they develop their soft power, particularly in the use of their navies. All right, so this is an example of how China is using a lot of the United States playbook. All right, now this article deals particularly with the Navy, but they also use the economic strategy of America. All right. The famous economic hitman was famous for going into nations and offering them loans that they couldn't pay back. Now, what he mentioned with the infrastructure projects, all right, China's doing that to developing nations through basically a loan. So these infrastructure projects are basically a loan. All right. China basically says, look, we'll build this road, we'll build this bridge, and we just need possession of the port for 50 years. All right. That's a strategy that they got from the US. All right. So when we go to Second Esdras, the 15th chapter, and it says, jumping down to 48, Second Esdras 15 and 48, thou hast followed her that is hated in all her works and inventions. All right, we see that on many points dealing with China, how they've got a lot of their playbook from Babylon the Great. All right, and all of this is going to lead unto conflict through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shai. All right, so I just want to highlight those points that was made in this video through the spirit and how it relates to prophecy. You know, we're in that time through the spirit where, and we haven't even touched the state of Israel. We haven't even touched the actual conflict on the ground in Ukraine, but it all leads to the same place through the Spirit. All right, so Lord willing, this was edifying with that. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yashar Allah, and a sincere salutation to all Yuakim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Akwad, who are believing this word in all truth and in sincerity. Shalom.